So, apologies. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Climate Environment Committee meeting on the 7th of November 2024. I would like to welcome you all here today, plus we have a number of other councillors who don't belong to this committee but are very welcome to be here, and welcome to you. So that's Councillor Martin Halliday, Councillor Rob Coford and Deputy Mayor Lawrence Kirby. So first of all, I'll move into our council blessing and I'll ask him, Tahiwi, to say that for us, please.
Kia ora tātou. I o mātou e whiriwhiri ana e ka take kei mua i a mātou aro e pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara hua pai mō ngā hāpari e mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa kia whaihua kia tō te katoa mātou mahi. Mā te maia te tiro whakamua me te hihiri, ka taia te arahi I roto I te kotahitanga me te aroha.
Thank you, Kim. So now we'll move on to item 3, apologies. I haven't received any apologies, but we have 2 people online today. That's Councillor Sophie Hanford and Michael Moore from the Waikanae Community Board. So now we'll move on to item 4, which is declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda. I have not been advised of any, so there are none, so we'll just move on to item 5. Public speaking time. We have no public registered speakers, so we can now move on to item 6. Deputations, we have none registered either. So now we'll move on to item 7. Item 7.1, matters leave of absence. Do any members request a leave of absence? Otherwise, they can go through the Mayor's office. Thank you, there are none. Move on to items of matters of an urgent nature. I have not had any brought to my attention, so we don't have any of those as well. Thank you. Right, so now we'll move on to the main part of our agenda, which are our updates. And so the first one we have is an update on the Waikanae Tika Te Katai project. So I would like to invite Mr. Andy Mackay to come along and speak to that. Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Rona koutou, through you, Madam Chair. I'll take this short report as read, but I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that councillors may have.
Do we have any questions from the floor? Councillor Coe.
I'd just like to say it looks like a fantastic project and set of activities that it's happening there. Well done to everybody. Don't have any questions about it, but it looks like everything's on track and some good work's being done. So well done.
Thank you, Councillor Coe. Kim Tahiwi.
Same as Councillor Coe actually, just it is an awesome project and we've been part of Art and Atiawa. We've always kept a watchful eye on it and we wondered how that was going to be turn that into something sustainable. So this is awesome. And I know there was there's quite a range of kaimahi that worked on that project. And it's given them awesome experience. And so we're hoping to look to do something similar through Ngā Hapu and Otaki, but this is awesome to see that that's going to be able to continue. So well done.
Thank you, Kim. So I have a couple of questions. So as you know, Andy, and as a number of other people here do know, I was on the advisory panel for this, and it was actually a fantastic process, Treaty House model. And so there was a mixture of community members and our local iwi, and when our work completed it, I think it's gone more into the governance role. And I suppose I have a number of questions just to understand how that is now working. So I see in here that you've got 16 work streams and there's also an action plan. How do those two fit together?
Yes, so I guess the space that we're in at the moment, with Jobs for Nature finishing in December, and the sort of transition to the ongoing business model with Aotearoa Ki Whakanagatā, we're continuing to work as Kawanatanga and iwi to progress each of the work streams in the action plan. This is dependent on funding, so we have been focusing on those sort of business as usual areas that Greater Wellington Department of Conservation and KCDC is already involved in terms of animal pest control, weed control, planting, and that fits in nicely with as well with Greater Wellington's work around fish passage barriers. We've also recently completed a project planting by Wiggery Drive, which is for whitebait spawning habitat. So this work is sort of continuing, and we're doing what we can with the budgets that we have to keep moving. But not every work stream underneath this is being progressed at the moment. In addition, the two roles that sit with Aotearoa Ki Whakanagatā, so there's a coordinator role that will be set up to essentially start to looking at how these can be funded and be progressed. So that is a specific role that is in place to essentially progress these work streams.
Oh, thank you for that. So, paragraph 7 talks about the funding, 106,000 per annum. So, is that from the next financial year or current?
The current financial year. So, Aotearoa is going through the recruitment process at the moment, and we should hopefully have those positions filled by January next year.
Okay, thank you. So I have one more question, actually two more questions. So somewhere in here, it talked about what was going to be completed in year 1 and year 2, and I'm not sure exactly when 1 and year 2 is. Is that this current year, and whether that's on track or not?
We had a.
Oh yes, it's on the screen there, down the bottom.
Yeah, so I guess the way that this has been designed is if the funding was available, then this is how it would have progressed. But there has been, I guess, a shortfall in funding. So we sort of tried to continue on with business as usual with the funding that we have. So I think, there's been a number of projects that are sitting there ready to go, but just waiting for their funding to align.
Okay, thank you. And I suppose also too, so this action plan is a summary, and I actually looked on the website, and I couldn't actually see the whole document there. Do you know?
Yeah. So there is an implementation plan, and there's been quite a lot presented to the governance group as well, but that detail hasn't been made public at the moment. So we are developing an implementation plan, and will really sit with that coordinator role to then start moving through those work streams.
Oh, is there any reason why it hasn't been made public?
Not particularly. I mean, I guess we're as a secretariat, we're working through the governance group, and so taking direction through the governance group.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Andy. So, Councillor Warwick.
I'm just wondering about the nursery at Ottawa Park, because we don't really have a lot of plans for Ottawa Park. So beyond next September, is that intended to be staying there, or there's not really the development plan for Ottawa Park has kind of gone out the window?
So there's quite a lot of infrastructure that's been set up at Ottawa Park at that nursery over the last 4 years, with the intention that Aotearoa would take that on as a business opportunity. So the lease is signed for that short period, but I guess the long-term intention is that would be renewed, and that that particular business would stay there. But yeah, other than that, I can't really comment. It's sort of, I guess, up to Aotearoa in terms of how they want to progress that.
It'd be good to have some feedback on Ottawa Park plans at some stage. Not related to this, but...
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. So we have Councillor Hanford online with a question.
Awesome, thank you, Jocelyn. Thanks, Councillor Pravanov. Yeah, a couple of questions, Andy. The first one, and just agreeing with what everyone said around how cool this mahi is and also how nicely it's been depicted in the visual that we have on the screen. I just had a question around how the impact of these different actions is going to be measured, both to make the case for this mahi to continue long into the future, but also to kind of track progress in terms of the revitalisation of the Waikanae Awa and its community.
Through you, Madam Chair. That's a really good question. I think this is a non-statutory set of actions, and this sits sort of alongside the whaitoa process, and so there's a lot of shared vision and goals across that. So I think that's the whaitoa will kind of be where that monitoring and those sort of standards get set. So there's no specific milestones or in terms of Waikanae Kitakai at the moment, but that's again part of that coordinator role to start looking at that, how to implement and then how to measure success or otherwise.
Okay, awesome. And just that kind of leads on to my next question. Does that also then mean that it's the same with the sort of comms and consultation around this mahi too, that also mainly sits in the whaitoa project, or just because there is, I guess, some presence of language around the broader community in this Kitakitai work? I guess how does that sit in with this or with?
Yeah, so the for various reasons the community hasn't been particularly involved in the last 4 to 5 years, and so there was quite a large planting event at Otoroa Park a few months ago. So we had 4,000 to 5,000 plants in the ground, over 100 people through the gate to really invite the community back in and get that back up and running. We do have 9 community conservation groups active in the catchment. We work very closely with them, and so it is really at a stage now where it's sort of opening the Waikanae Kitakai back up and sort of starting to wrap that back around the community. And I know from Atiawa Ki Whakangatai's perspective is that they're very keen to make strong connections to and keep working on that, and so that's been really awesome to see as well.
Awesome, thanks Andy. That's all from me, Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you. So I actually have a follow-up question to Councillor Hanford. So I suppose I have the benefit of being on the advisory panel, and I suppose I've also been on the panel for the Kapiti Whaitoa process, and I'm just wondering whether or not the action plan and some of these documents should have actually come to KCDC to be received. And I suppose by then, when it's in the process, then some of the milestones and some of the measurements can actually be involved, can be incorporated. Have you any thoughts around that? Or maybe Brendan as SLT manager? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm not completely sure of what the history,
Okay.
and so it's probably a question I can't answer right now. But we can come back to you
Okay, thank you.
with that. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts, Andy?
No.
You don't have to.
Yeah, it's probably best not to comment. I'd just defer to the governance group on that.
Okay, thank you very much, and I think it was something we will continue our conversation on. So thank you very much for your questions and your commendations on this project, and it is actually fantastic, and it will dovetail into some of the work that the Kapiti Whaitoa work will do. So now we'll move on to item 8.2, which is our waste updates, litter intelligence and the Otahanga Zero Waste Hub. So Robbie, would he like to come forward, please? Thank you. Thank you very much, Andy. Okay. Oh, was he? Sorry. Yes to note. Sorry. Yes. So Item, yes, recommendation that the Climate and Environment Committee note the update provided. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, councillor Coe. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. So I've also just been informed that we have an apology from our Mayor, Councillor Holbrow. So now we'll move on to item 8.2. Thank you, Robbie. And what's his other name? What's his name? Steve. Is it Steve? Is it Steve? Was he the other guy? Thank you, Robbie.
Morning, everyone. So today, I'll be presenting updates on a couple of new waste initiatives and an update on the Zero Waste Hub. So up first, we'll have a look at the Litter Intelligence Program. No, it's not. So Litter Intelligence is a data-driven program designed to help us understand and address litter issues throughout the country. As the saying goes, we cannot improve what we do not measure. So Litter Intelligence provides the accurate data needed to understand the scope of our litter problems and develop effective solutions. So the ultimate goal here is to understand the scale of litter at a few key points in the district, while involving the community and creating action towards reducing litter using these data-driven insights. So the program aims to understand the problem through high-quality data collection, which is Stats NZ approved and used for example, reporting against the Sustainable Development Goal on reducing marine litter. So it's the highest level of accredited data. The data is accessible through the online platform. You can go in and look at your local beaches or get nationwide insights. So by making this data accessible and accredited, it aims to sort of give communities the power to reduce the amount of litter reaching the marine environments. So the program trains volunteers to conduct these surveys. So it's a scientifically rigorous methodology called citizen-led science, aligned with environmental guidelines. Since I wrote this, we've got a number of local events registered, so sorry I don't have those to share today, but through the website you can see a number of events registered for the next financial year, starting with Raumati Beach this Saturday, Otaki November 19th, but following up from this I can share the full list of those events now that they're up. This is an example of what the website looks like, the dashboard. So it consolidates the total number of volunteer hours, number of surveys, number of locations, as well as a litter density. It's a really fun platform to play around with and just sort of have a look. This is the most recent survey from Kapiti Island, just as another example. So they found over one survey, 120 items, mostly plastic. By weight, that number flips and it's mostly sort of timber. So getting involved is it's pretty easy. So Sustainable Coastlines offer training and workshops to anyone interested in contributing. Workshops are free for community groups, schools. There's sponsored options available for corporate teams. The workshops cover skills in surveying, data collection, health and safety. It's one of the key parts of this program is that the community participation is a vital role in making this work. So I'll follow up with details about the events that have been registered. If anyone's interested in signing up, they can get in touch, and I'll put you in touch with the contract lead for us. Yes, it's a crash course in the Litter Intelligence program. Got a few updates on the Otahanga Zero Waste Hub since opening officially in September. So I think a few of us here were at the official opening. We had speakers from Localised Board, Sustainability Trust, the Mayor, followed by the planting of a dwarf kowhai tree together. One of my favourite quotes from the day was from Matthew Luxon, who asked us to think of the place as a wetland that slows down the flow of materials headed for disposal. So the hub serves as a practical facility for waste reduction as well as an educational and community-based resource to promote sustainability within our community. So since opening, the hours have been expanded to include Thursday and Friday. If anyone hasn't seen the hub yet, I'd strongly encourage you to pop in during these opening hours and see what they're doing. The website and Facebook page is now live. Just really, again, increasing the level of community engagement, keeping everyone updated on new programs and giving people the ability to reach out and get involved. So what you can do, so whether it's donating materials or picking stuff up or booking rooms to host workshops or meetings, there's a number of ways to get involved now. Materials accepted, so mostly timber, building materials, scrap metal. They've set up as a drop-off for PVC pipe recycling through the Mali recycling program. Plate window glass, which is different to your jars and bottles. Tetra Paks, so food and beverage cartons, and plastic and metal lids. So that's with the standardised recycling that came out this year. Lids are no longer in your curbside bins, but they can be dropped off here to be recycled. So the site operates a number of subleases to community waste minimisation groups with all the additional space on site. So the first leaseholder was John Wraith, who's building kiosks with rescued material. The first 2 kiosks he's built were made out of material from the Waikanai Library and some windows and doors from Te Nuhanga. Since then, there's 2 new leases. So this is Caroline from Organic Wealth. So there's a community composting corner which has, I think, three or four different composting systems that you can come in and view, see how they work, decide if that works for you at home. They're also doing small-scale residential drop-off of food scraps. And also, again, just a space where you can come and hang out and talk about compost systems. And the other new leaseholder is Anomaly. So they, this is another one that sort of came out a bit left field about recycling sewing machines, which, you know, I mean, people don't really talk about that much, but it turns out there's quite a big market for it. So he basically had a warehouse full of unrepairable machines that he didn't want to send to landfill. So he's got a lease on site to service, repair and recycle sewing machines from the region. David from Anomaly also works at the repair cafes in the district. And he's also now investigating and researching how he can recycle a specific type of plastic that's used in sewing machines. Yeah, so site's really coming together. So we're looking at little pockets, different little setups, you know, basically container-based leaseholders for various waste streams and things like this that pop up completely out of left field. Yeah, that's it from me, thanks.
So yes, Mr. Black, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, awesome presentation, thanks. Love the way we're going in our zero waste direction. Really, really awesome. One of the questions I have, I'm really interested in the initiative for the data collection. How do we get the data for all that waste around the community and stuff like that?
Yes, it's set up as a transect, so it's a 50-metre line where basically volunteers go along it on the beach, sift through the sand. Everything's taken out and then taken back, weighed, visually assessed, and then recorded. And then that data is entered to the website. So it's what we'd like to do is tie it into sort of a bigger beach cleanup event as well. So we've got this sort of really, looking into detail of the small stuff that comes up in the sand, which is mostly plastics, as well as also just using that as an opportunity to have a bigger cleanup at the same time. But for the data, it's just from that small transept, bits and pieces sorted through the sand.
Love that initiative. How do we take that data and actually use that for preventative measures, like saying, like advocacy to government to say, hey, look, we need to be a bit harder on single-use plastics or anything we find on the beaches and our rivers? How do we prevent it getting there?
Yeah, really good question. And I think that's where in the past, things like the plastic straw ban has been not necessarily from this program, but really good examples of where they're flooding into the marine environment. Another example was in, I think it was Porirua Council through this program, kept finding a lot of plastic, and it ended up being tile spaces from a local business. So it was basically tracked right back to someone's door.
Yes.
One of the new spots here is just outside Coastlands in the Wharemaku stream. So it'll be really interesting to see what's coming out of there. If there's any low-hanging fruit, easy wins, we can go straight back to Coastlands and see how stuff is getting in there. So that's the plan. Is number one is a bit of new local data and see what comes out of that. Or interceptors, that sort of thing. If there's nets or anything that'll stop a large amount making its way out onto the beach.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have an app, like a mobile app, something we can distribute to the public and say, hey, look, we found this litter, and have some incentivization, maybe take it to the schools, something like that, education programs?
Yeah, not an app, but just the website. This program does tie into, it does have content for schools as well. So so part of what's happening right now with the planning is the outreach and trying to get people like that involved. So approaching schools, community groups, that sort of thing, to get everyone out and about looking at that.
Brilliant. That's great. Great work. Thanks, Robbie. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coe.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. Look, there's some good things happening here. You've mentioned community participation and engagement a few times during your presentation, and I just wondered, are you getting good comms support in terms of spreading the word? I mean, I just know that anecdotally, I find I come across people all the time who are not aware of the Zero Waste Hub, for example, and I certainly wasn't aware of what was happening with the litter side of things. So, yeah, how are you spreading the word, and are you getting enough support on that front?
Yeah, on the Zero Waste Hub, we'd sort of launched it unofficially with no comms in June. So now that it's officially launched, that the comms are sort of growing quite quickly. On the litter intelligence program, so that's sort of, it's only really just been signed off. We haven't really nailed the comms side of that one yet, so it will be coming out really soon. We're just probably a little bit behind schedule with that.
Right. So do you feel as though you're getting enough support in that area?
Definitely, and part of the Zero Waste Hub is it's a whole nother entity that's doing comms on this sort of thing as well. They've actually hired a part-time comms person.
Right.
So having that support as well as council comms, it's much more sort of versatile. It's a lot easier for them to sort of spread the message, as well as through our work, through the regional program. There's a lot of talk, a lot of attention about it, but it's again, it's just sort of probably locally is maybe a few more events or that sort of thing, but it is kind of just growing quite organically.
So it's early days yet, really.
Yeah, rather than having a big sort of grand opening launch plan, we kind of did the opposite. Just got the ball rolling quite.
Soft launch.
Yeah, exactly. Just to figure things out.
Yep. Okay.
But even then, the buy-in and support so far has been really good considering.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, thank you.
I think Mr. Moore online. Do you have a question?
Yes, Morena, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Jocelyn and Robbie and the team. Look, I'm really enthused by this project, Aotearoa, and it complements well what's happening in Otaki, and it's in its third year. I attended their AGM at Zero Waste Otaki last night. Aotearoa Zero Waste was mentioned quite favourably in how it kind of complements, even though the operational way that Otaki is running their project is quite different in many ways. And I'll just make some observations. I'd also like to reiterate what Councillor Coe just said, that marketing and comms in this space is really important. And this is the third year for Otaki Zero Waste project, and they really have great cut through in the not only the local Otaki community, but quite around the district, that people come up there. And of course, they're only looking after wood waste in Otaki. So I would really encourage that to proceed, much wider in telling the community about what's going on and the depth and the breadth of what you can take at Aotearoa, which they can't do in Otaki. They had totals of 68 tonnes in the last 12 months of wood collected and saved from landfill. So that's 137 tonnes since they started the operation in Otaki. So complementing with Aotearoa is really good. And these are really good stories that us as elected members and council can really be proud of and working in the space. So I just want to congratulate the work and the launch of this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. So we'll go to Glenn Olsen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, again, I think it's a great project. I love it. I used to actually use the Otaki Zero Waste a lot, and you're much closer to me, so I'll be using you a lot more now, which is great as well, because it cuts my carbon of driving back and forth, which is nice. I have a question. It's type of for you, but it's also, I don't want to bring up something which is not there. But so the question is, I see the community centre being pulled down at the moment, and I know that some of the material is going to you. I'm just interested in what the quality of the material you're getting, because as I drove past this morning and I see the way it's been pulled down, then a lot of the material looks like it's going to be quite badly damaged. So, and I know that's the most cost-effective way to bring down it, but I am wondering out of that, how much of it is actually making its way to you, and what the quality of that is that you are receiving.
Yeah, we've used the windows and doors. If you visit the Aotearoa Zero Waste Hub, there's a new kiosk that's been built. You can actually see, the faded green windows and doors in that kiosk there. I think there was a lot of mould throughout that building, right?
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that. Yeah, so we actually got in there early to have a look at what material was going to be reusable. So it isn't, we didn't wait till they started demolition to start extracting. So we've extracted all of the stuff that was reusable. Yes, and there is issue with some of the timber in terms of mould. So that's why a lot of that isn't reusable. So they have a number of visits on site where they pulled material out and actually made some decisions around what they could and couldn't use. And so they pretty much optimised the usable stuff. And so what's left there is going to be disposed of.
Like the whole kitchen, I believe, was reused. A lot of the aluminium joinery. Sliding doors we're trying to use in something at the moment. So yeah, a lot of it couldn't be saved, but we got as much as possible, really.
Thank you. That was a very good question, and very pleasing to hear that council has been very proactive in recycling what it could in the space. So I actually have a couple of questions. So in relation to the litter intelligence page on page 16, which compares Takapuna Beach to the Kapiti Island Boulder Bank. So for the Takapuna Beach, there's sort of 2 dates there, and for Kapiti Island, there's just one, but the numbers are different. And I'm just wondering whether there's one of the dates is not right. And I suppose the reason I'm asking this is that, particularly with this right-hand column, we sort of live in a fairly unpopulated environment in relation to Takapuna Beach. But when you look at I suppose our litter density is quite high, and there's a lot of plastic. So there's a few questions in there, comments.
Yeah, so that page it's just the snapshot what the front of the website looked like. So I think it's just alphabetical order. But you're right. There is. I mean, what it shows again is that there's a lot of plastic washing up on Kapiti Island. Part of what they want to use this for is actually mapping those material flows. So we're quite lucky here that Kapiti actually misses a lot of it, but then you can basically track plastic coming out of the Manawatu River down into Wellington, bypassing us a lot of it, luckily. But again, yeah, so that's it's really interesting insight is that there's a lot of plastic on the far edge of Kapiti Island, where there's not people, there's no cafes, there's no restaurants, there's no shops. So yeah,
Yes.
but in terms of how that data is displayed, it was just the snapshot from the front page.
So it's interesting. So obviously the plastic does travel there, and so you're making the comment about mapping the flows. Does the data intelligence have the capacity to do that as well? I'm not sure quite how it does it, but
Not at this stage. I think that's part of what collecting the data at a really high level can be used for. Because then people whose expertise are that sort of thing, or whether NIWA looks at that sort of stuff, they've got this data set to be able to start mapping that. So no, it's not currently done at this stage. But there's a few really obvious hotspots, really high density beaches around the Wellington region as well, which it's really interesting to look at. Even on the Wairarapa, we've got quite a good coverage around the whole Greater Wellington region as well.
so I suppose, as you said, if you don't measure stuff, you don't know what the problem is, and then obviously when you get data like this too, then the next questions are, where's it coming from, and how can you actually reduce it?
Yeah, I mean, best case, in
Yeah.
an ideal world, would see, straws again, for an example. If there was lots of straws washing up, then the government takes action and follows up with that priority product legislation and actually bans them. And so that's part of, the quality of the data can be used at that higher level.
That's great. So it's a really great initiative, and I think it's it's something that I think as residents, it's really good for us to understand that I think we do know anecdotally that we're not exactly, there are issues, and this data is actually really highlighting some of those issues, and it's not necessarily all our making, but saying that we are probably making some, which is probably going elsewhere as well. So it's a great initiative, and also the Otahanga recycling depots. It's great as well, zero waste. And I suppose my question too, so there's a lot of stuff that can be sent there. What happens to it after that? Which is another big question, sorry.
Yes, at this stage, we're just focusing at the top of the waste hierarchy, so reusable timber. So, I mean, there's been a couple visiting since day one to build a tiny home out the back of their house. There's lots of interesting stories about what people are picking it up for. On top of that, though, it's looking at larger scale options, what we do with the timber that can't be reused. So they're looking at doing a bit of research for us as well, around sort of H1.2 timber in particular, about what could be done with that, whether it's biochar, looking at what's what chemicals remain after you do various things with H1.2. So we are looking at those larger scale options. I mean, reuse isn't going to stop or solve the scale of timber waste to landfill. It's a good start. It's the top of the waste hierarchy, but that place will also be a bit of a base for research and trying new ideas as well.
So obviously you've got food and beverage cartons and plastic and metal lids. So is there a recycle stream for those, or not really? At this
Yeah,
point in time?
the Tetra Pak cartons are at the Meanwhile space, the boards there, the save board. So that's made from those drink cartons. If you get up close, you can actually sort of see still the labels of milk cartons and that sort of thing. Lids, it's an accredited scheme now.
Yeah, they go to an established regional facility that makes them into other plastic products. So yeah.
So thank you. This is David Binns. Thank you. So my other question too, or comment. You talked about organic wealth, and I suppose I just wanted to sort of join the dots here too. So they were one of the funding recipients in the 23-24 round, and I suppose it just shows you how a little bit of money can actually go a long way. So you'll see later in our agenda that basically they have diverted this year 52 tonnes of food waste. So that's amazing. So so we have no more questions, but I commend you, as along with my colleagues, for the work that you're both doing in both of these spaces, and look forward to what else that we can do in this space. So thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Halliday has a question.
I was just going to make just a general comment, since I've been sort of helping out a little bit in this, but just wanted to commend all the efforts that are going in by the team in this space. It's great. We've landed the regional document. We've got our own document, and we've pushed past the opening, which I know is a huge amount of work, of the Zero Waste Hub as such. And I just want to acknowledge the team, because you've got a whole group of really passionate people in there. And I've mentioned this before, in regards to climate, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in this space, and there's a lot of good news stories. So I just really endorse what Councillor Coe and some others were saying about the comms aspect of things. We've got some good stories there that we need to get out with regards to telling our story in this space as such. But everything seems to be settling in quite nicely, I can see at the moment, and it's sort of opening up the different streams, and they're getting the plans together and moving forward with them. So fantastic work, guys, and I'm looking forward to see where it all goes.
So thank you, Councillor Halliday. So now we'll move on to our recommendation, which is we note that the update is provided. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Mr. Black. All those in favour? Against? The recommendation is carried. Thank you very much, Robbie and David. So now we move on to item 8.3, which is the estimated GHS emissions from staff commuting and working from home. So I'd like to ask Matthew Naby to come up, and also Jamie Young-Drew, who is our new Principal Policy Advisor for Climate Change. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and kia ora, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to briefly introduce myself. My name is Jamie Young-Drew. I'm the new Principal Policy Advisor Climate Change and Team Leader for the Climate Action Team. I live in Paikokariki with my fiance, and I have a background in law, climate change policy, and working with communities and businesses to transition to a low emissions and climate resilient future. It's a real privilege to be here at the Kapiti Coast District Council, and I look forward to helping the council achieve its climate change goals. And with that, and with your permission, Madam Chair, I'll pass over to my colleague Matthew Nabney to speak to his agenda item 8.3. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie, and welcome to Kapiti Coast District Council. Matthew.
Morena koutou, ko Matthew Toku Ingoa. For those who don't know, I'm the Advisor for Sustainability in the Climate Action Team. I think I've spoken to a few of you at a previous meeting. So today, I'm just going to quickly take you through some of the results from the recent staff commuting and working from home survey we ran back in June 2024. There we go. Awesome. So this information, it's used to help council understand our category 3 to 6 emissions. So it's running alongside our processes to understand our supplier-based emissions. So I spoke to you previously on that procurement standards work that we're working on. This is another part of understanding our broader emissions profile. And given the work council's already done to reduce our category 1 and 2 emissions, this is a pretty awesome opportunity for us to be in a leading place in this state. We've had a really good response rate in the survey with 191 people from across council, so that's just less than half of all staff participated in the survey. And you can see here that we created just a poster with the QR code so that all staff could participate even if they didn't have easy access to a computer. So they could scan in with their phone, just run through an app and quickly complete the survey. And crucially, this information helps us to understand our emissions profile, but it also meets requirements under the Toitū Carbon Reduce program, so that we can set a reduction or set a target for these emissions by the end of next year. Before I get into the results, I just want to quickly also acknowledge that, as staff said throughout the survey responses, that they have a lot of competing priorities, which means that taking alternative forms of transport can be difficult. People have children, they have to pick up groceries, go to sports events, whatnot after work. So that does obviously influence people's commuting choices. So just some summary of the key results. The total is still subject to verification by Toitū. We'll work with them to finalise the result. But between commuting and working from home, we estimate commuting emissions are 371 tonnes, and working from home emissions are roughly 4 tonnes CO2e. If these emissions were added to our footprint, it would increase our footprint by roughly 10%. However, at this stage, it's not part of our mandatory reporting boundaries. So we have our emissions reduction target, we have a set of emissions that report against that target, so this doesn't add into that reduction story at this stage. So I've said there it's equivalent to the emissions of sludge produced by the Otaki and Paraparaumu wastewater treatment plants, but it's similar to those emissions. It's very close to the emissions produced for the 22-23 financial year. We ran a similar survey in summer of 2023, and this figure's gone up roughly 30%, 33%, but it's due partially to seasonal variability. The previous survey was run during summer. This one's been run during winter. People take different trips. There's a few differences in the two surveys. The previous one wasn't designed necessarily to report against our future emissions target, but it just gave us an indication of where we're sitting. And just to flag there that 97% of our emissions are from car-based travel, and that's including people with passengers and travelling as a passenger. So you can see here in the red side of the pie, roughly, the majority of our emissions come from people driving alone. Up to 12% of staff are taking passengers. It's a little bit tricky to see there, but a lot of people are taking passengers or are passengers, and active transport. Almost 16% of staff take some form of active transport, either cycling or walking and running to work. So if we dig into those results a little bit, you can see here that almost 50% of staff are travelling, driving alone, roughly a 10-kilometre distance return trip. And overall, almost 70% of our staff are travelling within a 20-kilometre return trip. And based on the results, we've got almost 50% of staff are driving alone 5 days a week, and of that, it's half of those people within the 10-kilometre distance, return distance. And there's a broad range of distances within that. So some people are as far as a kilometre, others are as far as 114 kilometres away, return trip. So it's quite a broad range of travel distances there. And what's interesting is that of the people who are travelling by bike, they are also travelling, almost roughly 70% are travelling within a 10-kilometre return trip. So we really think there's an awesome opportunity here to really try and support staff take alternative forms of transport. And at this stage, we are looking into various national schemes to do this. Any schemes that we look at will have to be appropriate, obviously, for council. We have to consider any cost to council. And we also think there's an opportunity to discuss with our local businesses these different schemes and just to consider their emissions profile in this space. And so just quickly on working from home, there was a working from home survey run as part of other work council is doing. The survey results are slightly different. A lot of that is just in the way the questions are framed. But overall, the intent is that as we continue the survey into the future, consistency is paramount. We have to be able to compare results between years, and trying to come up with consistent working from home question. This meets our requirements, but we just need to consider how to apply that across council. And you see a large number of people don't work from home currently. And about a third of people work from home 1 day a week. Overall, our working from home emissions are about 4 tonnes. So for the number of staff who are actually working from home, that is quite a low figure. And next steps, we'll continue to develop this work program. So that's in addition to our procurement emission standards work. We'll look at how we can support staff take alternative forms of transport. And we'll also provide you with the results from the inventory. We spoke to you that it would be around October. There's just been a few delays in gathering some of our data, so it will be early next year. We'll come back with those results from that audit. Awesome, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation and all the information that you've gathered on this, and I suppose for the staff who've participated as well. Questions from Councillor Coe or comments?
Yep. I presume you're going to be doing this survey on a regular basis, are you, to monitor any changes?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, so the intent is that we'd run it at least once a year. Toitu recommends that we run it twice a year, and that we do it in winter and summer, because people's commuting
changes,
people's community changes, they change a lot.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, when you do the survey, have you asked people what the barriers are to them using more environmentally friendly forms of transport, and whether they'd be willing to consider other options? You know, what's their willingness, and what's the practicality of those other options? Have you captured that information in the survey?
So we have in the previous survey that was more as a broader request for information. This one we have left the section for comments. The aim with the survey is to be as quick as possible, but that is a key feature that we should emphasise in future surveys, key barriers, remaining barriers.
Or maybe it's something you could follow up with a focus group type of thing, where you go in depth and explore by discussion, you know, what some of the answers to some of those things are. Might be a better way to do it. You know, it's because you don't want to put people off answering a survey by having a big complicated survey. But maybe you ask, you know, a section of them, you know, 10 or 20 people to get in a room and just talk about, you know, what are the barriers and what are the opportunities, and because that would surely help with the next steps.
Absolutely.
You know, should we allow more working at home? Is transport a problem? I don't know, what can we encourage people to live closer to council? I can't understand those people that live like, you know, what are they living 70 kilometres away or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's quite a distance. Yeah. Oh yeah, place like Tahara. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coe. Mr. Olsen.
Yeah, hey, thank you. Hey, just some questions. I see this report, we seem to be focusing on the transport aspect of emissions and the carbon footprint here. So, which of course is a very valid thing, but the other side of it that, especially in a country like New Zealand, which seems to be missing here, and maybe it is in here and I've just missed it, is the electricity used. So when people are working from home, they're using electricity. You're heating the house, which you probably wouldn't be doing if you're working in the office, but the office is going to be heated if you're there or not. So, you know, and I think the energy is covered under, it's a class 3 or 4 emission, and this somewhere is, you know, classes of 3 or 4, yep. So how are we measuring that footprint? Because I know myself, when I'm working at home, my power bill over the winter months is about 15% higher than in the summer. So there's quite a big footprint that, we're not measuring and people are using, there. And that's what I think oil, gas and coal makes up about 25% of our energy production for our normal, and probably 100% of the peak, and the peak is over, winter. So, there is a huge carbon footprint that we're just not measuring because we're using that if they're here, but when they're not here, you're doing it twice. And the other thing I would wonder as well is when people are working in the office here, with the location to food and Coastlands and stuff, people often just walk over, to the cafe or Coastlands to get lunch. I wonder, are we asking the question when people are working from home, are you driving to the supermarket or to wherever to buy coffee or whatever and using the car to get those where you'd be walking otherwise? Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. So the working from home emissions factor, there's a default factor that you can apply, and that captures the average electricity use of a home. There is also an emissions factor for heating. We didn't include it in the survey at this stage. This is the first time we've rolled out the survey. From my perspective, the main thing was to get the survey out to our staff, make it as simple as possible, and to develop that system that people become accustomed to it and they're more likely to engage with it. That default factor is an average across working from home with the heating factor and without. And in terms of people's, I guess, whether or not they leave at lunchtime from their home to go and buy food or whatnot, our focus is when people are conducting business for council under our category 3 to 6 emissions, what do those emissions look like? In terms of New Zealand's domestic emissions profile, that petrol use and electricity use outside of those hours covers that. Council does, obviously, we capture our category 2, so we capture those emissions for any of our facilities that use electricity, and that changes according to our renewable state at the time, if more coal's coming online, and you see that between years. So when in last year's financial year, our emissions from electricity halved because we had so much renewable, because there was so much rain over that period. And all councils across New Zealand and organisations saw that. There was a national figure, yeah. So there's a few things in there. There are different factors that you can apply. Working from home with heating is one. And we capture other emissions here, but our focus is emissions while conducting business for council. Yeah.
Great questions. Now I'll move on to Mr. Sutton.
Thank you. Great presentation. Really interesting. And just building on Councillor Coe's comments, I'm struck that only 2 people out of 190 are using public transport to get to and from work. 1.7%. So I guess that's 1 to 2 people.
So that would have been within a certain sorry, yeah.
It's quite a startling figure, given that public transport, we are relatively well served by public transport in this area. But that's just a comment. Building on Councillor Coe's comments, this is really a low-hanging fruit, should be a low-hanging fruit for the council. And I think the attitudinal surveys that need to be done, the knowledge, attitudes, practices, information that needs to be gathered should be prioritised by your team and other teams on council. There must be ways, this is 10% of the council's emissions, there must be ways to incentivise behaviour when we understand that, to bring around about a reasonably rapid reduction or dramatic reduction in this. So I really urge you to include the focus group approach or the attitudinal surveys as you move this forward, and that's offered in the light of a suggestion. Thank you.
Can I confirm that? Yeah, I just want to quickly confirm that. So staff usage of public transport, so that's buses and trains, is closer to 7%. Yeah, so that's in that first slide you'll see there. Sorry, yeah, the legend's quite small, but you've got trains are 5%, and
sorry.
bus usage is 1.7%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 3 or 4 people.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to Mr. Black. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for your report. Brilliant. I'm glad we're getting down to those depths, and I just want to support what Liz is saying, that we actually have to really get in and interview people and say, right, what does your day look like? Why are you taking a car? Because, you know, if everyone's got kids and they need to take the kids to school or take them to after-school events, we're never going to get them to use alternate transport. And also, this actually feeds into the greater issue that I can see of public transport per se. You know, if you look at Otaki, we don't have enough regular public transport to get out of our region. And so everyone's forced to take cars. So how are we achieving greater advocacy to people who do dictate the public transport system?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Black. So now we move on to Mr. Judge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got 4 brief questions if you wanted to make a quick jot down, not so you know them all. In the slides, there was mention of e-bike discounts. So could you tell us more about that and whether or not that could be extended to the public? You have a lovely new car park, and it is a lovely car park. Do you know how much that cost, and if there's any behavioural studies that you're aware of what providing lovely new car parks does for locking in that particular mode? Are you aware that 371 tonnes of CO2 at a mark-to-market basis at today's price of $62.11 for NZUs is $23,000 per year? And if there is any way that that could be taken into account when funding emissions reductions activities in this output class, and if council does otherwise take responsibilities for those emissions in a financial sense. And the final one is, are you aware of EVs as a share of the number of cars driven to work? Thanks.
Thank you for those questions. So regarding e-bike discounts, there are several national schemes that can apply to organisations. We're still looking into the appropriateness for a lot of those, and we'll have to consider costs. In terms of public access to those initiatives, I'm not aware at this stage on how they apply to individuals versus to organisations. That's further work that we're looking at the moment. There's a lot of different schemes around bike purchase arrangements or public transport usage. But there are these schemes. Some have just been recently introduced into New Zealand. So there's some work to be done there. Regarding the cost of the new car park, I might have to defer to Sean Mallon.
Yeah, I don't have the exact number. You're talking about the public car park, because this is staff emissions. The public car park behind the library. Yeah. Happy to provide that information. I don't have the number, but we can forward that through to you. But again, that's public, not staff parking.
Yeah, and regarding studies of car park utilisation and whether or not people drive more often, I don't have exact studies on me related to that point. Yeah. And yeah, in terms of the price to offset those emissions, so obviously council at this stage doesn't have an offsetting, we're not offsetting any emissions at this stage. That's the focus of gathering this data, is to understand what our emissions footprint is, and so we can take steps to reduce that emissions profile. Because as we've discussed, we need to set a target for all those emissions by 2025. Our supply chain, our supplier-based emissions alone, during last year's audit, were above 5,500 tonnes. That's more than what our corporate emissions profile is, just our emissions we currently capture. yeah, at this stage we aren't offsetting anything, but we need to understand our total footprint to understand how we can reduce those emissions going forward. In terms of EV percentages, we do have that information from the survey, but I don't have it on me right now, but we do have that information as part of that.
So thank you very much. So I suppose I just wanted to make some comments as well, and I know that transport is one of our largest carbon emitters, and I see that there are some people who use public transport and e-bikes and different modes of transport to get to work, but I suppose it's about finding what the barriers are to using public transport more, and I suppose whether or not there are any barriers to people biking here. You know, I don't know whether there's adequate bike parks and showers for people to use when they come here, and even in some respects that also applies to elected members.
So yeah, feedback received through the survey did indicate that a few people who bike would like to see a better bike or a larger bike shed, or one that could accommodate more e-bikes. Based on data received from Locky Dock, that Locky Dock can, during summer, it can fill up. So any initiative to expand biking, we have to consider those barriers. Other people have said through the survey, showering facilities, places to store gear, that has been a barrier for them, but obviously a large barrier as well is the ability, is people's interest outside work. If they have children, makes it much harder to shop, take children around, take them to different events after work. Yes. And so no matter the distance, the convenience of a car in this district overrides that at this stage, from what I can see from the survey.
So thank you for that. And you didn't have any comments to make?
No, I was just going to comment about the bike shed. Really, in terms of that, as Matt's mentioned, that last survey picked up that was one of the issues in terms of storage. So part of the response to that was to look at the Locky Dock outside the council building, but also we've also made some space in the staff parking area to look to expand and provide an improved cycle storage shed facility. So it's just really looking at that cost at the moment and seeing what we can afford within. We have a limited budget there for something, but what that looks like and getting that done, that's one of the key things we're looking at this year to try and improve that. Because the one we have at the moment was 15 years ago that was put in, and it is regularly full, and overflowing. So definitely something we're looking at. We think would make a difference in terms of those low-hanging fruit would be to get an improved cycle shed provided.
So thank you, because I suppose that if people know that the facilities are often full, they're not going to necessarily bring their bikes. So thank you for that, and thank you for looking into that. So Councillor Halliday.
I was just going to make a suggestion to Sean that maybe we could be looking at the Otahunga chaps with their big shed, building the little sheds from recycled goods. Might be a low-cost way to utilise those products, but actually, again, good little comms exercise as well, as long as it's done well. But the sheds they're building up there actually are pretty damn good.
Great suggestion, Councillor Halliday. So now we'll move on to our recommendations. So on page 27, there are 4 of them. I know that the Climate Action Connected Communities team undertook a staff commuting and working from home survey in June 2024. Note that the results of the survey are used to estimate that the GHG emissions produced by the staff in commuting and working from home habits. Note that the estimated GHG emissions produced by staff commuting and working from home are 357 tonnes of carbon, which is 10% of the council's current GHG emissions footprint, and note that the council will be required to set a target for these emissions by the end of 2025. So can I have a seconder for those recommendations, please? go for Mr. Black. Thank you. For those in favour, say aye. All those motions are passed. Thank you very much. And so thank you very much to you both for coming along today. Nice to meet you, Jamie, and keep up the good work. And I think you can see by the number of questions that we're very interested in this, I suppose, our council emissions. So thank you very much. Thank you. Right, so now we will move on to item 8.4, which is Sustainable September. So Rob Dunn, and I'm not sure if Monique is going to come up as well, or Robbie, oh, you can stay, Jamie's going to stay there as well. Thank you. So thank you, yes.
Te Maria, good morning. Ko Rob Dunn Te Kuingoa. Just picking up on where Matt left off with that last report, I'd just reiterate that we're in the process of looking into some national schemes to incentivise e-bike purchase, public transport subsidies, which are applicable to both council and our local business community. We're working through those details at the moment, and we look forward to the chance to bring details of those schemes to this committee in a few months' time. So,
thank you for that.
With that said, I'd like to take these reports as writ. I'm aware I've got a few in a row here. So I'll take the reports as read. I've got a few slides just to bring everything to life a little bit. So I'll talk through those slides. I'll pause after each report, chance for questions and comments, and we'll move through them. So I'm talking here about Sustainable September for a start. Then we'll have a quick look at our an overview of our outreach and education initiatives planned for 2025, and then a bit of a summary of our climate action grants from the 2023-24 funding round. So thanks, Evan. Maybe I can do it. Here we go. So to just a little bit of context for this work. So with our climate emergency action framework, a few principles align really well to community outreach, education, and engagement. So that there's a good fit with this work. Sustainable September. So a couple of months ago, we brought a proposal for this event to this committee. Thank you for the encouraging response. Bit of a summary, so over 30 events over the month, over 850 attendees, costs about 14K plus advertising costs that came out of our operating budget, and a very positive response from both attendees and our community partners. So some of those verbatim responses, great attendance and feedback, great cooperation and teamwork. Welcome the opportunity to engage with our community. Great to have council supporting it. The workshop was well advertised and sold out quickly. Thanks for your support and trust of us, and we look forward to more next year. So really great response, but a few challenges as well. So challenges were a short lead-in time, limited advertising, busy schedule. September's a busy time of the year. There's quite a few other events on, and there were a few sort of technicalities around some of our bookings and people signing up online but then not turning up, which was a bit tricky for the workshop providers. So looking ahead to next year to resolve those issues, we're proposing to turn it into Sustainable Spring. Just give us a longer lead-in time, relax the schedule a little bit. Rather than having 7 or 8 events each week, we'll have 1 or 2. So drive up attendance that way as well. More room and better alignment with other events that council's involved in. We can streamline our booking system, iron out those technicalities, and we're looking into opportunities for sponsorship with our business community as well. So that's a quick report back on a project that we brought to you just a couple of months ago, and opportunity for questions or comments before we move on.
Thank you, Robbie, for that. And so, Councillor Warwick.
I'm sure this went out to schools beforehand, and I don't know how much engagement they had, but I'm wondering, as you're planning a yearly event, with colleges especially, maybe engaging them early, like now, so they could fit stuff into their curriculum for this, because they can't just go, oh, well, we're going to, curriculum is set quite a way ahead, usually starting now, and even maybe inviting students who have an achievement to do to be part of this and lead stuff might, I don't know, I just think they're the ones of the future, that we want them to be sustainable, we want them to think about this stuff, our children, because they're the ones that are going to lead, so it would be good to involve the schools, and I'm sure you have, but with regard to curriculum, it's not just an easy 2-week thing.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor. That's an excellent suggestion. We can look to that as we're planning for next year. Thank you.
All have a lot of stuff going on with this. Whakatūpiranga Tīto and Otaki College all have gardens and sustainable projects and stuff that might be able to feed in, given the opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. We'll move on to Councillor Halliday.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Great seeing you, Robbie. Look, just wanted to congratulate the team on the awesomeness that you are continuing to develop, but also it seems to be mature. There seems to be a bit of maturing in the space as well. I think taking on board the challenges you had in that Sustainable September and drawing them out to a 3-month period is an excellent step with regards to more engagement. I looked at that, although I didn't get along to any events, but it was just like action-packed. But, you might get along to one in a week, whereas what you're suggesting on the approach that you're taking will, I think, engage a lot more people in a constructive way. One comment I did want to make, I noticed here the workshop series for local businesses in collaboration with the Economic Development Team and Sustainable Business Network. If I could encourage connection with the our local Kapiti Chamber of Commerce as well. Happy to help facilitate that if need be. They are looking for ways that they can link into some of the kaupapa that we have in a constructive manner. It doesn't, and what I hear is money, 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 but it doesn't have to be that sort of collaboration, in my opinion. This sort of they could help develop the awareness of this particular piece of work within the business community, and would be a good working relationship potentially.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Some excellent suggestions there. And that workshop we ran with Sustainable Business Network as part of Sustainable September this year, that was a pilot, if you like. That was really successful. So we're now working with our ED team through the Pākehī Toitū network. Connecting with the Chamber of Commerce is a great suggestion. We'll be looking to run several of those workshops next year and on an ongoing basis with pitch for different, each workshop pitch for different businesses as well. So we've got a lot of SMEs here, but we've also got some bigger businesses as well. So their opportunities for action are similar, but there are differences as well. So we can differentiate our workshops so we're catering for everyone.
And look, just came to my mind, we've got the Māori business unit, a business group up in Otaki as well. They've got over 200 businesses on their books as well. So if we're going to make that connection with the Chamber, we might make it with them at the same time, potentially as well. But again, happy to help facilitate. Yeah, they could potentially be linked into that as well.
There's the Waikanae Business Association and the Otaki Te Horo Business Association. You aware of those? That'd be good to connect with as well.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Coe. Yeah, I'm aware of both of those, and as I said, I think we've had our first pilot. It's really great that there's a positive response, and I think there's opportunities to build from here, to engage with local businesses through several networks. So thank you for the suggestions. Yeah, terrific.
Thank you. So, Mr. Moore, you had your hand up. I'm just wondering if you have any questions online. Okay, we'll just move on to Mr. Black. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Simon.
Kia ora, Robbie. Thank you for that. Great initiative. As you've picked up, I think probably the feedback that I had was too much packed in, not enough notice. My suggestion is, why don't we just pick one or two things and really bed that down to the community first? Focus on like one or two things. I remember in the good old days when we used to have bottle runs and the whole community went around the whole neighbourhood and did something. So, you know, why don't we have compost runs or some collection days and do that annually and make it a community event, and then that would be really embedded into the community. Once that's done, let's move on to the next thing and the next thing. And so make it a journey for the whole community and how we can all get together. Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Black. That's a great suggestion. And I guess part of the response is the development of Sustainable September. Definitely this year it's a partnership with our community providers, and it was quite organic. So there were a few workshops and events that were council led, but a lot of it came from the community and what providers were happy to run workshops around what and who was stepping forward for what. So evolving that into our sustainable spring, I can see scope for both. We can continue to collaborate with our community partners for them to offer workshops that suit them, and we can also offer some specific things that might align more with your suggestion. And probably when we get onto the next topic, I'll suggest how that could look as well.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, so thank you. And I personally, this was a great initiative, and so many events were occurring. And I think, as you mentioned, there was, maybe the lead-in time was a little bit short, but I think probably, no doubt, there are some learnings in here in terms of, which types of events were more popular. And I'm not sure whether that's something to focus on, or whether the size of the people attending isn't necessarily important, but it's actually getting some of those different ideas out there. So there's two ways of looking at that, and how you can actually, I suppose, make it even more successful next time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Shall I move on to the next one?
Thank you. So we actually have some recommendations here. Thank you. Before we do that, so on page 39, we have two recommendations: that the Climate and Environment Committee note this report, and that the Climate and Environment Committee provide direction towards the 2025 program as appropriate. And I think we've done that. Thank you very much. So, all those in favour of this? Oh, sorry, a seconder for this, please. Councillor Coe. All those in favour? All those against? Passed. Thank you, and thank you very much for all this work, and the team and Monique who are involved in that project. So moving on to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So next up, planned community climate change education and outreach for 2025. So the words of this are in the report in front of you, but this is just a graphic to bring it to life a little bit. So these columns, if you like, are the different programs that we're offering throughout the year that have a climate or sustainability focus. So we've got the Aotearoa Bike Challenge that runs in February. We've got our Over the Fence Cuppas in March. Sorry, I just got to turn this way. Should have brought my glasses. We've got Over the Fence Cuppas in March. We're looking to resurrect our Greener Neighbourhoods program, which Council ran a few years ago, and we're looking to resurrect that for next year. Planning a guest speaker series next year as well. That could look like we have a couple of evenings and 2 or 3 speakers on each of those evenings talking about climate or sustainability issues. Sustainable Spring, we've just talked about that one. And again, we've just talked about working with Sustainable Business Network in Pākehā Toitu to run workshops throughout the year. And then there's a number of providers that we work with on an ongoing basis. So an example of that is we've increased funding for Enviro schools in the last 12 months. We fund our local repair cafe network, organisations like Energise Otaki, Walk and Wardrobes. We work with the Kapiti Environmental Youth Summit each year. There's a range of annual and ongoing events that we support. So through all these channels, they all have a overlapping but distinct focus. And then that arrow at the bottom, there's an opportunity for us to offer a range of education initiatives that we lead through these channels. So those include workshops offered by Remo around community connection and disaster preparedness and resilience, some climate-specific workshops that we're in the process of developing, and a range of opportunities for synergy with programs that are run across council, such as waste and a few other programs that we're still sort of pulling those together. But that's our I guess an overview of how what our community education and outreach program might look like for next year. So just before I move on, I'm aware there's quite a lot of information there, so maybe I'll just pause there if there's any questions or comments on that specifically before I move on to the next slide.
Councillor Coe.
You've got a comment in your report about that segment of the population that are challenging the climate change deniers. I'm just wondering how, are we going to cater for those people in some way to kind of reform their thinking, shall we say, or do we just leave them to one side and work with those people who are supportive of things happening in this area? I'm just wondering in terms of your program there.
Yeah.
Maybe it's with your guest speakers that you bring in, or is there a program to provide information, I guess, to that segment of the population who still don't see there's an issue?
Through you, Madam Chair. Look, that's an excellent question. Thank you, Councillor Coe. I guess the answer is, well, there's several parts to the answer. One of them is through these programs, we're actually looking to establish safe channels where we have programs that we set up, and if we look at greener neighbourhoods, for example, we have groups of households sign up to these events, and then through these established programs or channels, we can then reach out and offer a range of education initiatives. So probably from the perspective that you're talking about, well, I guess firstly I'd comment that it's really important that we work with all of our community regardless of their views, and our aim is to keep people on board and understand people's concerns and move forward constructively together. That said, I think the research would say that there's sort of 20% of people who are very aware of these issues and already really engaged. There's 20% of people down the bottom who doesn't matter what they say, they will just see things differently and will not engage. And then there's a persuadable middle. We're given the right information and the right incentives. We can see some effective behaviour change, and people are keen to be part of the solutions. So probably if we look at our proposed outreach schedule there, the one that arguably carries the highest risk is our guest speaker series, because that would be the one that's public facing. Yeah. So there's a range of mitigation measures we can put in place around that. For example, people need to sign up. We can have some security there. In terms of how we manage questions that come from the audience, they don't necessarily go directly to the speaker, but we filter those first. So we're also open to suggestions. If we're aware that there's a risk there, and it's really important that we still offer these education and learning opportunities to the majority of our community who are going to respond positively. That we continue to work with people who see things differently, but we also have some mitigation strategies in place. So if things get a bit heated, we've foreseen that, and we've got some plans to deal with it. So open to suggestions around that as well.
It's tricky. Yeah, there is a segment of the population that say we shouldn't be spending money in this area because there's no issue. So yeah, we're likely to cop some criticism for, you know, a lot of the work that we do in this space. So, yeah, how do you handle it? I guess it's about working with that persuadable majority in the middle, isn't it? And getting them to move to the right side of the argument, and just building some momentum so that the majority view heads in the right direction.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's also about selling the co-benefits as well. So the benefits to cost savings for businesses and households and citizens, for wellbeing benefits, for environmental benefits. When we, with careful messaging to really sell the co-benefits, then the message isn't necessarily focused on reducing emissions. We can talk about common values and benefits that most people, by and large, would really want to see. And in terms of costs, all of these programs fit within our operating budget. They're actually pretty cost effective. For platforms for us to engage with the community and to build those positive relationships, it fits within our operating budget. It's still a fraction of our, majority of our expenditures going on infrastructure. So if we look at overall expenditure, I think it's quite defensible from a proportion of funds that are actually being spent on programs like this. And given that we know that climate change and environmental issues are a real concern for members of our community, I think I haven't got the exact numbers in front of me, but I think we could provide quite a defensible budget around this work.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coe. So we'll now move on to Mr. Sutton.
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting slide. And just I really encourage you to focus on the whole, not just those that are amenable and those that are right on board, but we also need to be finding ways to engage with all around this issue. And so I wonder, it's a comment question. This describes the how, but it doesn't articulate in this or in the paper what this program is trying to achieve. And that comes back to the point that Councillor Coe was raising around, who are we engaging, why, how, etc. And it's great to have the resilience place, the mitigation measures in place. But I think that all would be helped by a very clear statement of purpose for this, which I know you have and you've kind of described it. But it would really help, I think, drive this a little bit more, because we do have to engage with the whole community. Whether people like the idea or not, the effects of it are going to impact on and are impacting. So thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Some great comments and suggestions there. And I think a response would be through offering a range of programs, the intention would be to try to cater for everyone to some extent. That said, there'll be some demographics of our population that we're not catching within this program, but as a starting point for the resource we've got, that we can then build on in the future and extend these programs out through different avenues and to different demographics, and that the messaging also needs to shift depending on the audience. So all of that needs to be quite carefully planned and articulated. But thank you, that's a great overarching question around and just articulating the purpose really clearly. And there's still a lot of design work happening here, but I think maybe the overall purpose, we can come back to our climate emergency action framework and those principles I had up at the start, along with priorities for the council, feedback we've had from community through Vision Kapiti. We know that climate and environment issues are a real priority both for this organisation and our community. So stepping into that education and outreach space is a really effective way we can help to build positive relationships and work together towards our district-wide emissions reduction targets.
My question was meant to be supportive. I really want to see this move forward.
Thank you.
I'm just going to wonder if you had a comment to make, Monique.
Oh, I was going to support, and I think Rob just touched it. Kia ora, I'm Monique Engelin, the Manager for Climate Action and Connected Communities. Just to reiterate, that we do have the Climate Emergency Action Framework that gives us clear line of sight to progress into this space, and also what we're hearing from Vision Kapiti, so ahead of what we're hearing this concern, so we're responding and such. And I think the challenge for us is then to tell our story there, that yes, actually this is true, that climate emergency declaration that we received a few years ago, that's what we're acting on. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. So now we'll move on to Councillor Halliday.
Yep, through you, Madam Chair. I just want to be a bit consistent with the comments I've made previously. And I hear all the wording around climate emergency and that sort of scenario, but I've said at the moment it is contentious, shall we say. Not the content, just the wording and, and everything we went through. And I'll just look at the coastal stuff we just went through in relation to all that. And I've been quite keen to sort of be pushing the conversation a lot more at the moment around the wording, so using sustainability, resource management, waste management, environmental issues, because they are all linked. But when we keep talking or having the main headline, climate change, and although that is exceedingly important, the sustainable aspect of things, I think, is the low-hanging fruit that really works towards changing paradigms with regards to how it's addressed. I still believe kids to train parents is a really good pathway, and I think there's a lot of leeway with regards to getting kids excited in this stuff, because they are the adults of the future, but also, as BP will attest to with their Smurf campaign, that was their most successful campaign. Why? Because the kids dragged their parents into the petrol stations, per se. So if we can get the kids engaged in fun ways, that, or even hold their parents to account, so to speak, in a very subtle way, then that could be a good pathway as well. But just wanted to keep that messaging from my end with regards to being a little bit more involved in the waste management side of things, that there's some good messaging there, and we're seeing that evolving. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there's not, but maybe elevating that messaging over the next couple of years, potentially around the climate change stuff, because we've got a lot of that stuff in place. We've got a lot of the things that we're doing internally in place, but it's all about changing those mindsets. And the waste minimalisation stuff to me is a very, very practical way of doing that. And great to hear about the food scraps up the thing there as well. I'm actually going to be, funny enough, hooking all the stuff that I did last night out of the bin and taking it up there later on today. So yeah, looking forward to incorporating that. Just some feedback.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks very much, Councillor. And I totally agree there's a lot of overlap between the sustainability, climate space, and both in terms of messaging and content and opportunities for action. And I think, as I mentioned before, the messaging and which term or concept we maybe focus on, that varies audience to audience. But thank you, really appreciate the comments. Thank you.
So, as one of the recommendations suggests...
Sorry, Madam Chair, there's a couple more slides in this section just before we get to recommendations, if that's...
Yeah, no, I wasn't actually going to go for the recommendations right now.
Okay,
I was just
sorry
to
to interrupt.
Yeah, no, quite okay. So one of the recommendations is to provide you feedback, and it's been great that the members have here today, and I suppose I have a couple of thoughts as well. So, this is an absolutely great initiative, and I think it's really important to get as many people of our community involved. But I suppose I'm interested to know where this fits with our climate strategy, which we haven't quite landed yet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you say, we haven't quite landed it, so my response, given that we haven't landed something, would be that education and outreach is a really important part of our strategy. If we look at a climate strategy as a overall high-level approach to how we're going to, for mitigation and adaptation considerations across the district, both led by council and through community, then these are examples of projects and programs that both help to raise awareness and understanding within the community and help to build positive relationships between council and community so we get this idea of working towards these bigger goals together.
Yeah, I suppose too, just following up on, I think it was Mr. Sutton saying in terms of having that climate strategy in place, it actually really articulates what the purpose is, and then some of the stuff, the purpose of this work will come out of it, as well as bringing along our community with us. I suppose the other part of this too, so this is a climate and environment committee, and I would like to hope that there is actually something along the lines for our environment initiatives here. So I suppose, we've got, there's lots of things that we can do better in our environment, and there are lots of community groups who are doing stuff out there, and it's about showcasing what they're doing. And I think they often work very much in isolation, but there are also many people who would like to be more involved, but they don't quite know how. And I know from the other side of it too, you've got those restoration groups who really would like more people, but connecting the two, actually connecting those environment groups with more volunteers is somehow lacking, plus also joining up those volunteer groups together as well, because they often work in isolation. And I suppose it's about showcasing some of our, initiatives in our water quality, restoration of wetlands, our ecosystems, and even our predator control initiatives that are going on. So there's actually a lot going on in that case, but I think only a certain part of our community are aware of all that, and I think if other people were aware of it, that they would want to become more involved and would find a way to do so. So back to my question, is there a similar initiative for our environment initiatives?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's a great question, and the Greener Neighbourhoods program is probably something that can really focus on environmental initiatives as well as climate action specifically. Sustainable Spring as well. It's a lot of these programs are broad opportunities for sustainability, environmental, climate awareness, networking, rather than climate specifically.
So is there someone who's actually sort of leading the environment part of this work?
We do our best to work collaboratively across councils. So, for example, we had Andy Mackay here earlier. We're in regular conversation with Andy, and we do have a bit of a cross-council forum of staff from different teams coming together to discuss opportunities for synergy at an operational level. So a program like this, where there's opportunities to bring in a range of people to, as you mentioned, to connect the dots with various opportunities for community groups that are already working and work that council's leading. We take a collaborative approach to what we could bring into each of these programs.
Thank you, Rob. So I'll just move on to Monique.
I just wanted to give a note that, yes, the biodiversity element of climate change, which is traditionally seen under the same umbrella, biodiversity is managed by the Parks Open Space and Environment team. So Andy Mackay is leading that kind of restoration. So we would liaise with that team to check in about what kind of programs they've got and whether they collaborate. So I guess it's iterating that it is a separate work stream, but that we do work together, and we've kind of forged ahead with this out into our community as an outreach, and they have community groups in their outreach as well, and how it's about how we work together. So we'll be looking at those as we go forward as well.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you, Monique. So now I'll move, I think Brendan has some comments as well, GM, in the space.
Yeah, just to add on to what Monique mentioned, it is a big piece of work, big space to play in, this environment space, and And we are doing our best. The role that we have talked about at previous CES meetings, I think it was advertised. We advertised today. Biodiversity role. So that role, essentially, we'll work in Andy's team just to support the work that they do in that space, and it'll free him up to kind of take a bit more of a coordinated approach to this piece of work right across the region. Noting that there's quite a bit of work we need to do initially on our own pieces of land that we have. So that's the priority at the moment. There's lots happening in this space. I know there's a conversation tomorrow that he's starting up with a group that are interested in predator-free carpety. So it is gaining a lot of traction. So I think watch this space, but hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months there'll be a lot more of a coordinated approach across the environment piece of work in carpety. It's quite exciting.
Thank you for that, Brendan. And I do really look forward to some of these initiatives, and particularly having this advert for biodiversity officer in the pipeline. Thank you very much. So I now move on to Mr. Black.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, team. Just to pick up on some of your comments, Jocelyn, how about we have a landscape map of all the groups out there, and just have let's say, a public register of everyone out there, because I know there's just so many groups and so many overlaps, and I think, from my own exploration of all the groups in Otaki, if we had a more of a coordinated approach, we could probably achieve a whole lot more. And if understanding the groups out there was probably my biggest challenge when I came to my term. And I had one piece of paper of, here's a couple groups, and now we've expanded on that, so we know there's dozens and dozens of groups, and all is centred on their similar but separate areas. And if we had a register where you can say, look, here is the description of what this group does, here's some contact details, but also how can we actually combine these groups to actually be more effective together as well.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Black. I know we do have a list on the council website of all the conservation focus groups that we have across the district, but there's definitely an opportunity to maybe add to that, and as you suggest, even to display that in a different format. That as you suggest, a map that might be help to communicate that information.
And maybe have a place to actually register, for people to come and register their groups with you as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Mr. Irons.
No, just again to add there, that is a piece of work sitting with the strategy and growth team at the moment, just mapping all our stakeholders and groups we have relationships with. So it is quite significant. I know most teams or departments would have their own stakeholder plan or list, but there's a piece of work going on at the moment, and it's kind of in lieu of or in support of the new CRM piece of software that's going to roll out mid next year. So it is happening at the moment. Yep.
So if I could just make a little comment as well. So I definitely agree that is something that would be really, really helpful. And I think also too, with the Climate and Resilience think tank, that is something that we've also mentioned to be really critical, because you have lots of people who are working in isolation, don't know who else is there, but there are some overlaps and there are some gaps. Yeah, so I think in both those spaces. Thank you. So Rob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, just before I move on to the next slide, I would just add that I've taken this high-level overview to our iwi partnerships team. There's lots of great opportunities for collaboration with both our iwi partnerships team and Mana Whenua. So we've had that conversation, and we'll work with them as their priorities and capacity allows for any opportunities for collaboration. So if I move on to the next slide, and just a bit of an overview here. So in terms of staff climate education, we've offered a range of workshops and initiatives through the last couple of years. We're working with learning and development team to develop those approaches further. That looks like a bit of a mix of in-person workshops and online learning, and we'll be extending that out to all of our staff over the next 18 months. So the idea would be we'd have all our staff engaging with these education initiatives over the next year and a half. And then within that this is within the report in front of you as well. So, and this is a bit of a question for you, really. There's an opportunity for us to work with elected members as part of induction post-election next year. This could complement the information that's available on the local government climate education hub. We could provide a bit more local context for that information. That could be a bit of a mix of in-person workshops or online resources. So we don't necessarily need to dive into those details now, but if you think there's interest in that, we could maybe look at another workshop to scope that out a little bit further. So there's a bit that I've just moved through there, sort of the community outreach and education, staff education, and then the possibility of education with elected members as part of induction next year, and just open to any comments or questions before I move on to climate action grant reporting.
Mr. Sutton.
Yeah, just a quick question, and I'm not sure that I'm expecting an answer, but I think I might just ask it anyway because it's kind of the elephant in the room. How will your community outreach and education programs address, deal with, acknowledge both the CAP report that was received by Council in May and the Coastal Ratepayers Union's Coastal Risk, whatever that is, that was accepted by the Council in October? How specifically will you or not address those or incorporate those into your community outreach and education programs?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you. That's a great question. And look, my initial response would be, with the caveat that we haven't actually developed the detail of what these programs would look like, but my initial response would be that we'd sort of steer clear of discussion around that program, and until we receive sort of official advice from SLT or council committee otherwise that we have a certain stance on that. That wouldn't be a topic that we'd look to bring up through these education programs, where there are lots of other opportunities for education that focus on positive actions everyone can take without needing to get into the nitty-gritty of difficulties around adaptation considerations for private property. And I do note that there's the ongoing parliamentary commission of inquiry around that process at the moment as well. So in some ways this council's shown leadership by being proactive in a community consultation space around what the options should be. Until we have some clearer national guidance around how this should be implemented at a local level, I think it's probably better for us to steer clear of detailed conversations around that.
Okay, now, so we'll, really good conversation in the space. So now we'll move on to the recommendations on page 40, that the Climate and Environment Committee note this report and that the Climate and Environment provide direction towards the development and delivery of these proposed programs as appropriate. So do I have a seconder for these? Thank you, Councillor Warwick. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion is carried. So I know that, if you don't mind, I know that you've been speaking quite a while and we've been here for a while, so I think we'll have a 15-minute break, if that's okay.
Sure.
And so 15 minutes will come back just before 11:45. Thank you.